All of today's stories were sent to me by subscribers and listeners just like you. So if you have a story you would like to send my way, go to astheravendreams.com and click the button to do so. And of course, thank you. I have a story about an ex-girlfriend that went a bit crazy and really taught me a lesson about dating. Mainly to get the hell away from anyone that starts to throw red flags at you in high quantities over a short period of time. When I met Ada Lynn, shortened to Lynn, I was immediately smitten. She was everything I wanted in a girl. She was a solid 10 for me, was super polite to literally everyone, loved the same things as me, and she didn't really have a wild side. I've always been a bit of a wallflower, so I wasn't looking for anyone that had a crazy social life, or liked to be out in public all the time. Lynn was, as I got to know her over the couple weeks before we dated, perfect to me. And I fell super hard super fast. She and I were very happy together for about 3 months. Things were perfect. She would stay at my apartment every weekend, and we were making plans for the future. Lynn seemed like she was the perfect partner for me, and I really thought that we had a very bright time ahead of us. Of course, with the good things come the bad. Around this time, my mother was hit with a cancer diagnosis, and me being her only child, I felt the need to commit a lot of time to her, to help her where she needed. My dad hasn't been around since I was 5, so a lot of it fell on my shoulders. I had no problem bearing this weight, as I love my mother and I wasn't going to let her struggle. Helping my mother, of course, meant that I wasn't home as much as I used to be. I ended up having to set time aside to take my mother to her treatments, and I ended up staying over at her apartment several nights because I didn't want her to be alone. And I had to shave off a lot of the time that I got to see Lynn. At first, she was fine with it. She hadn't met my mother, but she said that she understood and she was supportive of me being the one to help her. That lasted about 2 weeks. Until one night when I got home, she was sitting in the parking lot waiting for me. I was a bit shocked that she was there since it was like 10 at night, and I hadn't told her I was going to be home that night. The only reason I came home is because my mom told me to go get some sleep in my bed instead of sleeping on her couch, and that she would be fine. She approached me as I walked up to my apartment, and she seemed happy at first, until I mentioned that I was exhausted. She then immediately started asking me why I was so tired. I told her that I'd been helping my mom all day, and that I'd spent the last few hours rearranging furniture to make things more accessible, in case my mom got worse. And she came back with, "Are you sure you were with your mom? Are you sure you weren't with another woman?" I will say that I may have responded harshly to her when she said this. Something about being accused of cheating after I spent a whole day helping my mother, who needed me, compounded with the stress of my life at the time, just set me over the edge. I went off. I asked who the hell she thought she was to even insinuate that. I called her a few names that I probably shouldn't have, and then I told her to go to hell. Like I said, as much as I was really head over heels for her, I was not in a good headspace, and her saying that really messed me up. It was a quick and rash decision to end something that I held so dear, but if she was going to start down that route while I was dealing with my mother, then I was done. And, of course, that wasn't the end of it. In fact, that was where things started to go insane. A couple of days later, I got home from work, and as soon as I walked into my apartment, I wanted to freak out. Nothing was taken or broken, but it was pretty clear that someone had broken into my home, and I could pretty quickly figure out who it was. There were post-it notes all over my apartment stuck to various things, and on each of them was a personal note. But they were such a mixed bag of emotions. For instance, one said something like, "I miss our late nights together." And then the next would say, "I hope you and your new girl die in a fire." It didn't say girl, it used a different word, but I find it degrading, so I won't include it here. You can figure out what it said. There were, if I remember correctly, 170-something notes all over the place. Clearly, she was a bit unhinged with her unfounded accusations. I called Lynn and asked her what her problem was, and she told me that she didn't know what I was talking about. I mentioned the notes, and she just kind of tried to play it off like, "Oh, yeah, that. I don't know, I was just in a bad mood." I told her that she had committed a crime by breaking into my apartment, and she laughed and told me that I couldn't prove that she broke in. I, once again, went off. I told her that I was done with her, that she needed to move on and get over me because I wanted nothing to do with her. She then said that she wanted me to reconsider my statement, and I doubled down, telling her that she needed to leave me alone before I called the cops and got a restraining order. I didn't think I would actually be able to get one. I just wanted to put it in her head that she needed to leave me alone. That next morning, when I got up to go to my mom's, I went out to my car, and once again, she was waiting in the parking lot. She got out of her car and started to approach me, but I just got in my car and drove off as fast as I could, hoping that she would get the idea that I was willing to ignore her existence. She then made it really hard to ignore her. When I got home and saw a fire axe sticking in my front door. Like, it was seriously dug into the wood and just sitting there. That was a really fun conversation to have with the leasing office, that I had come home to that, and they certainly thought it was confusing. I just had to tell them that I'd had a nasty breakup. I ended up having to pay for the door since it was technically vandalism by somebody that I knew, which was fine. I didn't really care. Over that week, every day when I would leave, I would see her sitting in the parking lot just staring at me. I wasn't even sure if she was leaving or if she was living in her car in the parking lot just so that she could stalk me. What's even more strange was the fact that this went on for about 10 days, and then she was just gone. Just like that. She was no longer in the parking lot, and I never saw her again. Like, at all. She never attempted to contact me again, she never came back, and I have not seen her since that last day. I have literally no idea what happened to her. If she just realized that she should move on, or if something actually did happen to her, but she's been out of my life completely. While I don't wish harm on anyone, Lynn did put a fire axe through my front door. So, to be honest, I don't have a problem with her just disappearing. That's my story about my ex. The woman that I thought was perfect, that went from 0 to 60 on the crazy scale over the matter of a couple of days. And over something as dumb as me spending more time with my mother, who was going through cancer treatments. If anyone wants to know, my mother went into remission and has only had one concerning moment since then. Right now, she is fully in remission and living a very happy life. I've also gone on to a couple other relationships, but nothing long-term. Greetings. I almost did not write this in because this paralysis happened only one time to me, and I say thank goodness to that, because it was a most disconcerting experience. Back in the mid-90s, I know, I'm old, my then boyfriend and I decided to move west from New York City, and slowly made our way to Los Angeles. and we crashed at his old employer's office/warehouse combo in a light industrial area. It was a little creepy to hang out in too long. There were no windows in the room we were staying in, but otherwise it was a large, clean, carpeted, and unused conference room. I did like the peacefulness of it, and did a lot of artwork in there after going for long walks in the mostly charmless area that had once been home to miles of orange groves. There was just one really sad handful of trees in front of some paper distributing plant in the historic honor of Southern California in a more agrarian time. The 3 trees hanging on between an electric fence and an urban throughway. Once I had been outside long enough, then I would come in for a nap while, we'll call my ex Sean, would be in one of the front offices that Jim, the owner, and his ex-boss had supplied him. It was a nice office. It did have a big window that looked out onto not much, but the sun did come in. And there was a computer, printer, phone, big desk. Everything was there for David to start up working again. Because we lived there, he would sometimes go onto the computer on Sundays and putter around in the office after we'd come back from a great Chinese place down the road that fed everyone who worked in these corporate parks. I went for a nap as I was working nights on the phones for another company, and Sean would join me in that as well. I turned out the lights, and it was always a bit creepy just how very dark that room got when the lights went out. And we had no computers or anything set up in there, save for a phone way at the other end of the giant room, flashing a little red light. It was tomb-like quiet there, being a Sunday especially, and I fell asleep quickly in the dark, cool room. And then at some point I woke up. I don't know if it was an hour, 2 hours, 20 minutes, I had no idea. At first, I just opened my eyes and saw directly above me an annoying light. It's purely a rectangle, as if one of the boards got moved above me. It was one of those types of ceilings. I wondered if there was a workman who pulled out a panel and had lights up there working. I was super confused and went to sit up, and that was when I experienced the paralysis. I could not move. It was terrifying. The fear hit me fast, and I realized I could not talk either. I was trapped in this dark room with this light above me that I was now realizing did not illuminate the rest of the room. It was this singular light of rectangle that did not in any way illuminate the rest of the room. I began to panic. Was I drugged? Was I dead? I knew that Sean was deep into whatever he was doing. He never came back this way when he was up front and working on projects. If I needed medical attention, it would be hours before he would come back. I wondered if I was going to die of just the panic itself, because I wanted, more than anything, to not be in that room and not staring up at that rectangle. I started pushing, just pushing, with all of my might. And it felt like I weighed 1,000 pounds, but I managed to roll over and out of the bed onto the industrial carpet, where I saw the rectangle of light beaming onto the carpet, as if mirroring it. But again, no light from it illuminated any other part of the room. I heave and pull myself up. I felt like metal, like wood. I couldn't breathe. And I inched my way to the door and still could not talk or scream or anything as I pulled myself up and made the most difficult trek of my life. Way harder than anything, including a climb up Mount Rainier a few years back. I didn't feel the nausea or confusion or any pain that might come from being drugged. I just knew that I probably should not be able to move at all, and it was sheer will getting me down the hallway. I just leaned against the wall and moaned as best as I could, but I know that he wouldn't hear me. This boyfriend was quite kind and mild-mannered, but deeply bookish and nearsighted. He would just fall into whatever he was doing like deep meditation. And finally I made it to his office, using every ounce of strength that I could muster, and I had to really let my hand go onto the desk with a bang to get his attention. His back was to me, but I saw what he was doing on the computer. He was writing to various chain stores about the product, and I saw that he had a new one in the name of the person. I saw everything on the letter. It was kind of just background. My main concern was that I was in a state that I had never been in before, and I had no reference for it. And I was telling him that it took me at least an hour and a half from waking to now to even get out of bed and down the hall. I may have even began to cry. I felt like just too much of an ordeal. And how could I even explain it when the last time he saw me I was perfectly fine? I may have asked him to open the front door, I may have asked for air or something, I can't recall what happened next. I really wish he would have just called 911 or something, because I think he just sort of shrugged like it was bizarre, but did not see the danger of what I had gone through. I somehow made my way back to the bedroom, conference room, and turned on the light and fell into the bed again, because I didn't know where else to go or what else to do, and I fell back asleep. Later, at some point, I woke up and I felt more normal, though maybe tingly, hot, cold, or disoriented, but able to move. I was still panicked somewhat from the unexplainable events, both the rectangular light and the inability to move without the most intense effort. This time I really wanted out, and Sean was still most likely in his office. I was a little upset that he had not checked on me after I told him what happened, but I made my way down the hall again, this time with more ease, and I told him I was so grateful to be better now than when I saw him last. When I saw him when I was mostly paralyzed. And he just said, "What?" He had a decent memory, and wasn't the gaslighting type, but he swore that I had not come into the office at all. And yet when I told him what he had been doing, the letter he had been writing and who he had written it to on the computer, his eyes opened really wide. Because the only way I would know that is if I was in the room with him. He swore that I had not been, and that the conversation had not taken place. And yet I knew exactly what he had been doing. I told him again, for me, but the first time for him, about the creepy light in the bedroom/conference room, and having, for lack of any other better explanation, sleep paralysis. I have no idea what happened, and it confounded both of us. I really thought that at first he was messing with me, but that wouldn't explain the light that did not illuminate, or just the general weirdness that took hold on that otherwise uneventful afternoon. But it certainly has been confounding. In 2014, I finally decided that it would be my last year working on the high seas. It paid very well, but there's a reason for that. It's extremely hard being in the middle of the ocean for 3 months at a time on a non-luxurious 50-foot freezer boat. Living on the ocean is a constant reminder that humans are not meant to be there. From the stench of rotting fish bait mixed with diesel to the constant motion of the swells under your feet, combined with the vastness of nothing, I always compared it to being an astronaut. It tends to drive you up the wall eventually, no matter how fortified you are. And for context, just being able to sit on non-moving furniture back at home was an ethereal experience. The last day of the season tends to be the longest, as we have to pick up every long line that was in rotation and detail the deck of the mess left behind. And this would take us very late into the night. On this particular night, we ended our day around 1:30 a.m. We were 17 hours away from land, so our captain decided to take a nap and allow us 2 hours of rest before we took our wheel shifts. Yes, not standard practice. He was an alcoholic. We were so far offshore that our captain put us in a slow autopilot, which essentially would just keep us from not drifting further from land as everyone took power naps. My little ritual every night was to make tea and smoke cigarettes by myself on the deck. It was the only time that I got to myself in such small quarters. This night, however, was both the last night of the season and of my career on the ocean. Although I was relieved, I felt a weird bittersweetness knowing that I'll never be this far out in the Pacific Ocean again. I climbed to the top of the cabin where I had secretly stashed a joint in the outdoor freezer. It was sort of my little secret treat at the end of the season. I lit it, and I stared out into the moonlit ocean. I went into deep thought for a while. As I climbed back down, my jacket got snagged on a fishing hook, which was from a fishing rod stored behind the ladder. This is when my 19-year-old brain concluded, you should do something you will never be able to get to do again. And that was, well, letting all of the fishing line out on a 200-plus pound test rod into the near infinite depth of the ocean. Just to see what would happen, I guess. I wasn't at all concerned at the time, as I've seen essentially 99% of the fish that lived out here, but I've yet to see certain deep-sea oddities, such as anglerfish, and as such, my fascination took a hold of me. I proceeded to clamp on a bigger, heavier halibut lure onto the fishing line's carabiner, which wasn't really designed for rods, but I felt it was heavy enough to sink further down. I began to let all the line out at the A-beam port of the vessel. Standing there for what seemed like an eternity, I began to give up on actually letting it all out. At this point, it was a little past 2 a.m., my day's work was starting to become more apparent on me. I started reeling in quite quickly as I lost interest in this whole idea. I just wanted to sleep at this point. When suddenly my rod got hooked on immense dead weight. Extremely dead weight. It wasn't like a fish. I knew what those felt like. I instantly realized that I'd gotten snagged on a kelp patch on my way up. I just wanted to get this done and over with. As I got the kelp patch closer to the boat, I peered over the railing and I noticed the water was absurdly black, even for dimly lit night conditions. Almost Vanta black. I tugged on my rod trying to assess where the kelp was, when I saw a tea saucer-sized silver circular light flash in the water. I honestly went lightheaded not knowing what I was looking at. I started hearing something reminiscent to hot tub jets spewing out water, except much, much louder. The louder it got, the blacker the water became. At this point, I'm just confused until I see an arm roll up the side of the boat. As the water cleared from the inky blackness, I saw an 8-foot-long cigar-shaped creature. It was a squid. Out of everything I've caught in these waters, this was by far the most unexpected, as squid don't tend to make their way this far up north. But I do remember hearing about an instance a few years back where they got stuck in certain ocean currents, which pulls them further up than normal. My mind instantly went to, how can I get this thing on the deck? The bragging rights that I would have amongst the crew on our entire trip back would be a poetic end of my career. I began to look for a gaff hook, one arm on the rod, one arm pushing totes around on the deck frantically looking. I kept a lot of tension on the rod just to ensure that it was still there, but I noticed that my rod was starting to bend very aggressively, nearly pulling the tip to the underside of the boat. The power of this thing felt almost like a hydraulic winch. No gaff hooks in sight. They must be stored in a storage compartment as we were going to be docked tomorrow. It was standard practice so that they wouldn't get stolen. I rushed back to the railing, peeling over the side. No squid in sight. But the immense tension was still there, and I haven't let any line out. Until I noticed the unfortunate sight. The squid had latched itself onto the bottom of the boat like a tree trunk. I put both of my feet on the railing, nearly pulling my back to the floor. I felt a huge release, almost like a giant Velcro strap being pulled apart. I nearly fell on my back end. I lunged towards the railing again, trying to shorten the line even more to inch this thing out from underneath. but my skinny teenager arms buckled almost instantly as I could see this thing rolling its whole body and arms back to the bottom of the boat. My anchoring foot slipped on a coil of loose rope on the ground, nearly throwing me off the deck. My gut hit the railing, face to the water, its huge head with its silver saucer eye peered out for a moment. They were darting around aggressively, almost like it was analyzing me. I neutralized myself to put my feet on better grounding. I began to accept that the risk here might be higher than the reward. Accepting my strength and its immense power, I began to contemplate cutting the line. I noticed the three-pronged hook was attached to the base of its tentacle. In an optimistic attempt, I pulled the rod tightly. The tip starts to bounce and flick. The squid began to contort and twist its whole body, pulling its tentacles close to itself, wrapping one tentacle around its hooked leg. Knowing it has compromised its grip on the bottom of the boat, I pulled once again until, suddenly, the rod snaps straight. There's a cleanly cut, amputated squid arm on my hook. This thing performed surgery on itself. The whole length of the squid slowly pulls forward out from under the boat, and I swear it stares at me for a moment. With one graceful contraction of its arms and a jet stream of ink, it then disappears into the depths. I stood there for a moment waiting for my heart rate to hit baseline. I placed the rod on the deck with the squid tentacles still attached and just stared at it. I pick up my teacup from the ground, and I walk into the galley. I throw the remainder of that day's cold coffee into my cup, head my way to the captain's stateroom, and knocked on the door. No reply. I opened it a crack and said that I'm ready for my wheel shift. The captain, in a drunken mutter, asks, "Have you rested?" I reply, "It's time to head back." I haven't worked on the ocean since. I'm a recovering addict who has done drugs for more than half of my life. I'm in my early 30s. And once finally seeking help for my mental health, which was the leading cause to the addiction, I was diagnosed with PTSD, anxiety, and depression. The PTSD is from domestic abuse in every form. One day when I feel more comfortable opening up, I have some seriously insane in-life experiences that could, hopefully, help deter someone from making the same mistakes and choices. However, that's not the reason for this post. I apologize for the long introduction, however I felt the need to set the scene. So, here goes, I guess. Due to the previous info, I suffer from terrible night terrors. Ever since moving back home, I know, it's pathetic, I'm in my 30s, but I couldn't trust myself living alone anymore. I've been told that I almost nightly scream, cry, or beg for my life in my sleep. My sister lives at home while she's in law school, and her bedroom is directly across the hall from mine. I've woken up screaming, begging, drenched in sweat, crying multiple times. My bedroom shares the same wall as one of the upstairs bathrooms, so if my TV's on or I'm talking in my room, you can hear it pretty well in that bathroom. One night, my sister's girlfriend was sleeping over and she heard me screaming and crying while she was in that bathroom. She went back into my sister's room and was genuinely freaking out that something was wrong. The next morning, they both told me that they thought I was being attacked, and that it scared her badly. I said to my sister, jokingly, "Thanks for not making sure I was okay." That's when she proceeded to tell me that this happens almost every night. So here lies my concern. I, up until that point, had no idea that it happens so often. As previously stated, I do know that I wake up completely traumatized sometimes, but not every night. The nights I've woken up, feeling scared or PTSD-related feelings, I can feel something waking me up by touching my legs or feet. I wake up, and I swear something quickly drops down or ducks where my legs and feet are hanging off the bed. Every time. The issue is that I never remember anything that caused me to be so terrorized. So, please, if anyone has any advice, I would greatly appreciate it. Is there any way that I can maybe remember my nightmares? Or maybe it's best not to know. Maybe, even one day, I can lucid dream and fight along with whatever demons my subconscious is fighting. Also, I want to know what is waking me up, that I feel a physical touch and pressure pushing my legs or feet down every time. But thank you for your time and patience, and thank you for reading. I've been a subscriber for a long time, but I didn't think that I would have a story to submit. I feel as if my wife is no longer my wife. So, the woman I married was a strong and religious woman who was proud of being 3 years sober. She was holding her own Bible meetings and doing church activities. We've been together for over 3 years and have been married since March of last year. About 6 months ago, she was diagnosed with PMDD, which, for those who don't know, is premenstrual dysphoric disorder. It is a nightmare. It's as if there was a 2-week-long period with higher emotions. Anyway, the main way to get rid of it is to have a hysterectomy. She was off for 2 months of work and then had the surgery, so she was out of work for 5 months or so. And in that time, we got closer and went through more tough times together, making us a better couple, I thought. After the hysterectomy, she had to have emergency surgery due to a hole developing where she had the surgery and getting infected. It swole up to the size of a baseball before she had the surgery. When she got home, she was not the same wife that I had as when I dropped her off. She started to look at everything differently. It was all of a sudden party time, and her morals and values don't matter anymore. Just a couple of hours ago, she left to go to her niece's house to drink with her. A month ago, she was trying to witness her and get her to church more. It's so weird not knowing the person you've been with for 3 years anymore. I don't know if I went through a glitch in the Matrix, or if she was replaced with a body snatcher, or is possessed. I just know for certain that the woman who was with me today was not my wife. She told me that the marriage was over, which breaks my heart. I put all of my heart and effort into making our relationship work, but at the same time, I'm almost relieved. Because I know that I'll be away from the cycle of weirdness that this lady is currently going through. I just hope that the woman I was with is somewhere out there, because she was truly amazing. So that, my friends, was a collection of stories that were kind of a grab bag of various scary things, but every single one of them was sent to me by a listener, a subscriber, if you will. Potentially a subscriber, I suppose. They may not be subscribed, I don't know, but they all listen. I know that much. So yeah, some really interesting stories, some definitely good spread of stories, and I actually quite enjoyed them. So, a huge thank you to each and every single one of you that sent your stories my way, as without you guys, this video would not exist, obviously. Or it would exist later whenever I got other stories. But then if I never got any stories, it would never exist. My point has been made, and it was not a good one. Anyways, hopefully you all enjoyed this. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button. If you're new to the channel and liked what you heard, consider subscribing. I would really appreciate it. If you have a story you would like to send to me, just go to astheravendreams.com. There's a big button in the center of the screen that says to send your story my way. And yeah, it could be used in a future video like this or a specific topic, depending on what the story is about. Yeah. And if you're feeling so bold, you can go down to the comments down below and leave me a comment letting me know your thoughts. I do have to ask, please do not post your stories in the comments, as it does make it difficult to save them, because I'll see it, tonight, and then there's a high chance that I just don't remember it's there because it's not on my list or it wasn't sent to my email. So make sure if you're sending me a story, you do it through the website or email directly. Yeah, that's all. Anyways, friends, I hope you're all having a beautiful day, and I hope that I do see you again here very, very soon. And of course, until then, remember you are loved, you are valid, and you are important, and you're the best you that you can be. Never let anyone tell you otherwise, and never forget it. And until I see you again, my friend, much love, and sleep well.